Hello there, welcome to Planet America. I'm John Barron.
I'm Licciardello, and we've got a situation.
Free speech is under attack in America.
President Trump put his television critics on notice.
They'll take a great story and they'll make it bad. I think that's really illegal.
We can do this the easy way or the hard way.
Growing concerns over Trump's crackdown on free speech, including from his own former White House lawyer, Ty Cobb, is our special guest.
And we're going to take a deep dive into that crackdown on free speech and Trump's enemies and the political left, all in the name of Charlie Kirk.
A memorial service for assassinated Conservative activist Charlie Kirk has been held at a football stadium in Glendale, Arizona, amid Super Bowl-level security and a guest list of the kind usually reserved for the funeral of the head of state. It was part memorial, part political rally, part revival meeting, with speakers greeted by showers of pyrotechnics. Fellow Conservative activist Benny Johnson summed up a recurring theme of the day centred on faith and family, recounting the advice that Charlie Kirk had given him.
Center your life on Christ. Fall in love. Get married. Have 1 million kids. And live out your American dream.
Kirk's life's mission emerged as more about faith than politics, recruiting young men in particular to Christ, as well as conservatism, getting them to church as well as the ballot box, leading their families and leading society. Here's Kirk's widow, Erica.
To all the men watching around the world, accept Charlie's challenge and embrace true manhood. Be strong and courageous for your families. Love your wives and lead them.
A crowd estimated at 100,000, mostly dressed in red, white and blue, heard speakers from behind a screen of thick bulletproof glass. And while there's no evidence the alleged shooter was a part of a wider conspiracy, there was a lot of talk that they and the left were responsible.
You know, I can't help but think that they tried to silence my friend Charlie Kirk. They tried to silence our dear friend Charlie Kirk, and tonight, we speak with Charlie and for Charlie louder than ever.
President Trump's arrival was greeted by chants of USA, USA, and he sat next to his major donor and sometime critic, Elon Musk. His eulogy frequently veered off script into his election wins and the causes of autism, before he concluded by bringing Kirk's widow back on stage for a solemn rendition of the national anthem.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much, and good luck. God be with you. Thank you.
Amid the understandable grief being expressed by friends and political allies of Charlie Kirk, there have been growing signs of a wider crackdown on left-wing groups and free speech in general. The President says they're now investigating progressive groups they accuse of supporting violence.
The problem we have is on the left. And when you look at the agitators, you look at the scum that speaks so badly of our country, the American flag burnings all over the place, that's the left, that's not the right.
In fact, the US Supreme Court held in 1989 that burning or otherwise destroying the American flag is protected as a free speech right. But that is just one of many ways the Trump administration is trying to police people and their actions and what they say, even if it is entirely legal. Vice President Vance hosted Kirk's old podcast last week, and on it he said he wants retribution against anybody seen to celebrate Kirk's assassination.
So when you see someone celebrating Charlie's murder, call them out. And hell, call their employer. We don't believe in political violence, but we do believe in civility. And there is no civility in the celebration of political assassination. Get involved, get involved, get involved. It's the best way to honor Charlie's legacy.
There are now a lot of people on TikTok and elsewhere who are claiming to have been fired from their jobs for criticising Kirk or celebrating his killing. I suppose it's worth making clear at this point, Chaz, that whether you agree with it or not, it is not illegal in America or on TikTok to say, I'm glad somebody is dead, or that you think that somebody deserved it when they got shot because you think that they're a racist or a sexist or a homophobe or a liberal or whatever. It is all protected under the First Amendment to the American Constitution. There are limits legally, including defamation and what is referred to as fighting words and true threats. So you can't say, somebody really ought to kill that person, or I'm going to kill that person. But the Trump administration is trying to equate any criticism with incitement to that kind of violence.
Yeah. Also, to be clear though, those sacked people on TikTok from before have got nothing to do with the First Amendment. Their sackings largely spring from a private website dedicated to getting Kirk critics sacked. It was initially called charliesmurderers.com, although it's since been rebranded the Charlie Kirk Data Foundation and in fact taken offline. But that site was run by private individuals, not the government. So the First Amendment provides no protection there. Now, let's be honest, that site spearheaded some horrific cancellations. Never mind people promoting violence, one Texas Roadhouse owner-operator was sacked because his wife shared posts mocking Charlie Kirk. A conservative activist highlighted the posts and wrote that the servers are upset and feel intimidated after reading what their boss's wife said about Kirk. And then the next day, the boss, not the wife, was sacked, although his dad had to share the news because the company told him not to post on Facebook about it. So that's awful. And yet, it wasn't against the First Amendment because the government had nothing to do with the sacking. Having said that, when the vice president gets involved, that's different, and then we've got a problem.
Indeed so. And on that same J.D. Vance-hosted podcast, Trump's Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, revealed that, in fact, this crackdown is something he had discussed with Charlie Kirk before his death.
The last message that Charlie sent me was, I think it was just the day before we lost him, which is that we need to have an organized strategy to go after the left-wing organizations that are promoting violence in this country.
See, this is an issue, John, especially given Steve Miller has made it crystal clear that what he means by going after organisations promoting violence is actually going after his political opponents.
The Democrat Party is not a political party. It is a domestic extremist organization.
Problem. And that's not an idle threat either. Miller's even spelt out how he intends to do it.
Under President Trump's leadership, I don't care how, it could be a RICO charge, a conspiracy charge, conspiracy against the United States, insurrection. You want us to live in fear? We will not live in fear, but you will live in exile. Because the power of law enforcement under President Trump's leadership will be used to find you, will be used to take away your money, take away your power, and if you've broken the law, to take away your freedom, Sean.
He wants to go after them with RICO laws or racketeering laws used against the mafia, essentially. And this is how it works in practice. Last week, some protesters interrupted Trump's dinner. Fairly harmless stuff there, but this is how Trump reacted.
She was a paid agitator, and you have a lot of them. And I've asked Pam to look into that in terms of RICO, bringing RICO cases against the criminal RICO, because they should be put in jail. What they're doing to this country is really subversive.
He's threatening to prosecute with RICO or racketeering laws people for simply protesting, John. And before you say, oh, that's just Trump sounding off, he doesn't mean it, his Deputy Attorney General completely supports his position.
But to the extent that it's part of an organized effort to inflict harm and terror and damage to the United States, there's potential investigations there.
But were those women in the restaurant inflicting harm or terror or damage by protesting the President of the United States? I mean, they were just shouting, basically, in his vicinity.
I mean, repeat what you just said. I mean, honestly, so you're asking whether there's damage done by 4 individuals screaming and yelling at the President of our United States while he's trying to have dinner. That can't be a serious question. That cannot be a serious question.
Everyone should be concerned about that clip, John. Meanwhile, Trump's also started singling out groups to attack. Trump last week designated Antifa, which he described as a sick, dangerous, radical left disaster, to be a major terrorist organisation as well. And he strongly recommended that those funding Antifa be thoroughly investigated. Now, this is odd because Antifa isn't actually a formal organisation. It has no leader, it has no staff, it has no membership. It's just a description of a political position, like Greenies or white supremacists. It's just a bunch of people doing stuff. And also, Trump made exactly the same terror designation back in 2020 during the Black Lives Matter protests, and it had no real life effect at all. Apart from everything else, there is no list of domestic terrorist organisations in America. Trump's just making that up. So this designation, probably not going anywhere. But it's the next step that I think we're all kind of nervously awaiting. Who's he going to name next? Steve Miller has a plan. Let's see what it involves.
Probably involves writing that list that you were talking about. The Trump administration's willingness to wield whatever powers they have appears to be having a major impact already. For example, the indefinite suspension of late-night talk show host Jimmy Kimmel.
The controversy stemmed from this joke during Monday night's monologue on the Jimmy Kimmel live show taped on Hollywood Boulevard. It regarded not slain political activist Charlie Kirk, but Tyler Robinson, the 22-year-old man accused in Kirk's murder.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
That comment didn't seem particularly outrageous, but 2 days later, the Trump-appointed chair of the Federal Communications Commission, Brendan Carr, was asked about it on another MAGA-friendly podcast, this one hosted by Benny Johnson.
In what appears to be an action by Jimmy Kimmel to play into that narrative that this was somehow a MAGA or Republican motivated person. If that's what happened here with his conduct, that is really, really sick.
And then he had this piece of advice for the stations that broadcast Kimmel.
I think that it's really sort of past time that a lot of these licensed broadcasters themselves push back on Comcast and Disney and say, listen, we are going to preempt, we are not going to run Kimmel anymore until you straighten this out, because we licensed broadcaster are running the possibility of fines or license revocation from the FCC if we continue to run content that ends up being a pattern of news distortion.
So, Brendan Carr, the federal regulator, was making it very clear that he has the power to take stations off the air if they don't boycott Kimmel themselves.
Well, actually, if I can just jump in there for a sec, John, Carr is asserting he has the power to take stations off air for news distortion, but I think that's a bluff. The FCC regulations make very clear that broadcasters can only be punished for news distortion if it can be proven that they have deliberately distorted a factual news report. This wasn't a factual news report, it was a comedy monologue. Furthermore, the FCC regulations state that rather than suppressing speech, the FCC should encourage responsive counter-speech from others. In other words, Brendan Carr should have called for Kimmel to be corrected on ABC, or for him to issue an apology or a clarification.
Put Greg Gutfield on instead.
Why not? More speech. But he instead called for Kimmel to be suspended. That's a breach of FCC guidelines. And this also doesn't even comply with Trump's very first executive order this year that states no federal government officer, like Brendan Carr for instance, shall facilitate any conduct that would unconstitutionally abridge the free speech of any American citizen, like Jimmy Kimmel for instance. And it's also a direct contradiction of what Brendan Carr said back in 2019, that the FCC does not have a roving mandate to police speech in the name of the public interest. Carr literally claimed the right to police speech for the public interest when making those threats, John. So I don't think Carr does have this power that he claims, but he sure pretended that he did.
Yeah, and it worked. He also has a power to refuse looming mergers, and on that front he added this warning.
I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead.
If that seemed like a threat, it's because it pretty much was. Those affiliates immediately freaked out. They told Disney and ABC that they were dropping the Kimmel show. The suspension then came from head office very quickly. He was off the air. That all drew cheers of approval from President Trump.
Well, Jimmy Kimmel was fired because he had bad ratings more than anything else, and he said a horrible thing about a great gentleman known as Charlie Kirk. And Jimmy Kimmel is not a talented person. He had very bad ratings, and they should have fired him a long time ago.
Clarifications there, that's wrong. Kimmel was talking about Kirk's alleged killer, not Kirk himself. And while Kimmel's broadcast audience has fallen in the last decade overall, he's still number one in the ratings amongst the key demographic of adults 18 to 49. So he was doing okay. Now, David Letterman popped up this week. Of course, he hosted late night shows for over 30 years on American televisions. And he was asked his reaction to the Trump administration's role in Kimmel's suspension.
We all see where this is going, correct? It's managed media, and it's no good. It's silly. It's ridiculous, and you can't go around firing somebody because you're fearful or trying to suck up to an authoritarian criminal administration in the Oval Office. That's just not how this works.
That all quickly earned Dave a presidential rebuke.
Whatever happened to the highly overrated David Letterman, whose ratings were never very good either? He looks like hell, but at least he knew when to quit. Loser.
He does look like hell.
Yes, yeah, fair point. There are also some concerns from an unexpected source this week.
What he said there is dangerous as hell. He says, we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way.
Yeah.
And I got to say, that's right out of Goodfellas. That's right out of a mafioso coming into a bar going, nice bar you have here. It'd be a shame if something happened to it.
I didn't know Goodfellas was Yiddish.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that's from, Ted. But if President Trump hoped that this suspension would silence satire, well, so far it doesn't seem to be working out too well, because Kimmel's getting a lot of support, including from some of his late-night rivals.
But tonight, we are all Jimmy Kimmel.
But to be honest with you all, I don't know what's going on, and no one does. But I do know Jimmy Kimmel, and he's a decent, funny, and loving guy, and I hope he comes back.
It is a privilege and an honor to call Jimmy Kimmel my friend, in the same way that it's a privilege and honor to do this show every night. I wake up every day, I count my blessings that I live in a country that at least purports to value freedom of speech, and we're going to keep doing our show the way we've always done it, with enthusiasm and integrity. And I'm...
Are the naysayers and the critics right? Is Donald Trump stifling free speech?
Of course not, John. Americans are free to express any opinion we want.
But look, all gags aside, Chaz, this is still having a chilling effect, even when it comes to getting people to come onto this program to talk about what's going on in the universities, in law firms, in the public health field. This week we had somebody in the entertainment industry cancel their interview with us because they're understandably concerned about the potential damage that speaking out could do to their ability to work and earn money in the United States. A reminder, perhaps, that sometimes the most insidious form of censorship can be self-censorship.
Yeah, this has been happening for months now. It's a bit worrying. But I want to deal with some of the defences from the right about what happened to Kimmel. Firstly, some have noted that many right-wing figures were censored over the last decade, and the left at the time didn't give a stuff. For instance, Roseanne Barr tweeted, "Imagine an administration putting pressure on a television channel to fire a comedian they didn't like." But of course, no administration put pressure on ABC to fire Roseanne. She was fired in 2018 during the last Trump administration.
And she was a vocal Trump supporter, so it makes no sense. But that sacking wasn't entirely free of politics. Roseanne's Ambien-fueled late-night tweets included, on one occasion, comparing an ex-Obama advisor, Valerie Jarrett, who is African-American, to an ape.
See, that wasn't good.
No.
No! Now, it is true that the Biden administration did actively campaign for certain figures on social media to be censored back in 2021, but they never openly threatened those private companies like Brendan Carr just did. That is why the Supreme Court didn't rule against them. Some have said that the government didn't suspend Kimmel in this case. The ABC network did. And this is an example of TV stations doing their job of punishing a broadcaster for lying. Brendan Carr himself tweeted that broadcast TV stations have always had the right to not air national programs that they believe are inconsistent with the public interest. So he's glad to see that many broadcasters are responding to their viewers as intended. Look, this is pure gaslighting, though. I remind you, Kimmel's monologue was on a Monday, The TV stations did nothing and said nothing about that monologue on the Tuesday, but then on Wednesday, immediately after Brendan Carr threatened them, that's when they sprung into action. So it seems likely they were responding to the government's threat and to the government's threat alone. And let's remember the context. Nexstar, the owner of the TV stations which cancelled Kimmel first, they have a major merger proposal before the FCC to create a mega company with 265 TV stations representing 80% of all US TV households. Sinclair, the other owner of TV stations that cancelled Kimmel, also has a proposal for more deregulation in front of the FCC, and the Walt Disney Corporation, the owner of ABC, will also need FCC approval for its proposal to buy the NFL network. So all of these companies need Brendan Carr's explicit permission to make billions of dollars. And Carr threatened them directly to either punish Kimmel the easy way or the hard way. And if you have any further doubts that this is simply about silencing a Trump critic, listen to Donald Trump himself.
When you have a network and you have evening shows and all they do is hit Trump, they're licensed. They're not allowed to do that.
One last thought. Brendan Carr chose to threaten these companies in public, when he easily could have pressured them behind the scenes, just like, well, the Biden administration pressured social media companies back in 2021. So why did he choose to go public? Maybe he wanted to intimidate Trump opponents with what might happen to them if they don't pull their heads in, which brings us back to that chilling effect of sacking Kimmel that John mentioned before. Maybe that chilling effect is intentional, and that is the scariest prospect of all for anyone who cares about a higher principle than simple partisanship.
Well, for more, we're joined by Ty Cobb, who served as White House lawyer during the first Trump administration. Mr. Cobb, thank you for joining us on Planet America. How concerned are you of the Trump FCC exerting this pressure on the corporate bosses of ABC America to get rid of Jimmy Kimmel?
Well, I'm concerned about Brendan Carr as one of Trump's, many appointed thugs, threatening to abuse the Constitution and manage content, eliminate criticism, or in this case, just a factual few statements from people that, the president doesn't like and feels are unduly critical of him. That's not the American way. That's a clear violation of the First Amendment. The law is very clear on that. And it's reminiscent, sadly, of, what Hitler did in 1939 in Germany once he had started to gain control. He directed Goebbels to terminate from the airwaves 5 comedians for their critical, quote, witticisms. Putin, when he took over in the early 2000s in Russia, systematically silenced critical media outlets, had independent television stations pressured to toe the line. If they did not, they were bought out or shut down. And now you have Trump, another authoritarian, taking the same course in a country where people were brought up on the concept that was prohibited. That was not American. That was against the Constitution. So I'm very concerned.
Now, Trump supporters might say, hang on, this isn't a dictatorship forcing companies to sack Kimmel. This is the government expressing a view and private companies making a free choice to sack Kimmel in a bid to suck up to the government for commercial reasons. The company made a free choice here. So that is a very different scenario to Nazi Germany. What's your response to that?
Well, there is that. I mean, that's a fair point. Now, in the United States and under the Constitution and under the case law regarding the First Amendment, what Carr did in making that threat is prohibited. That is illegal. And making the threat alone indicated that he was prepared to do it if the company would not. Did the company have commercial reasons to do so? I guess they perceived that. Of course, that was before their market value dropped $3 billion in the wake of that decision. The mere fact that the company intervened and took that action does not sanitize the illegality and constitutional abuse that Carr engaged in when he made the threat that he would do so if it continued.
But ultimately, Ty Cobb, won't your comparisons to Nazi Germany in and of themselves seem hyperbolic? Are things really at that level, do you think?
If a drunk driver runs over a child in a crosswalk in 1939 and a drunk driver runs over a child in a crosswalk in 2025, it's fair to bring up the previous example. And what happened in 1939 was at Hitler's direction, Goebbels took comedians off the air. And in this, you've got Carr acting at Trump's behest, threatening that he was going to have these people removed. And keep in mind that as soon as ABC took the action with regard to Kimmel, Carr said there will be other shoes to drop. So I'm not remotely concerned about hyperbole in drawing comparisons between two authoritarians.
Constitutionalists like myself and yourself get very worked up about legal technicalities that are increasingly simply ignored in the real world. Are we trying to preserve a doctrine that the country effectively gave up on decades ago?
Oh no, not here. I mean, the First Amendment is rock solid. The Supreme Court recently in a 9-0 decision, made it very clear that what Carr did and what Trump's trying to do is prohibited. The same thing is also true in terms of the ethics of prosecution. I mean, the U.S. Attorney's Manual and the Department of Justice guidelines prohibit a failure to make sure that prosecutors act even-handedly. Prosecutors are mandated to act even-handedly and based on the evidence, not based on the whims of a budding dictator.
And Ty Cobb, this is being seen by many as a crackdown on free speech, a constitutional crisis. Another way to look at it is just to say Donald Trump does not like to be criticised, much less ridiculed. Could it be as simple as that? This is just about Trump's ego?
Oh, very much so. I mean, everything that the president does is driven by his abject narcissism. He loves power. He loves adulation. I mean, we have these silly cabinet meetings now where, a cabinet official really isn't permitted to get to the substance of what they have to say unless they, praise the president effusively. Ty, for his leadership, for, the food that they're being served. It's really ridiculous. But in terms of vengeance, I mean, Trump has made it very plain that he will execute his vengeance at his will, and he's also made it clear by his appointees that they are only going to be people who are loyalists and will do his bidding, not the history of ethical, intelligent leaders and professors and learned people that we're used to. We now have Kash Patel running the FBI. We have RFK Jr. On the verge of bringing back virtually every disease that a vaccine is required for. So Trump is very much moved by his narcissism, and I agree with you. It's no more complicated than that.
Ty Cobb, thanks for joining us on Planet America.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And that's it for another trip to Planet America. We will be back at the same time next week, and you can catch the weekend edition on ABC News on Friday night.
Both shows are also available on ABC iView and online. And don't forget the Pet Podcast. You'll find it in all the best pod places. See you there. Bye-bye.